The Royal Commission into Violence, Abuse, Neglect and Exploitation of People with Disability is now in session.
Good morning, everyone, and a good morning to everyone in the hearing room in Homebush and to everyone who may be following these proceedings on the live stream. This is the third day of Public Hearing 30 of the Royal Commission into Violence, Abuse, Neglect and Exploitation of People with Disability. The subject matter of this hearing is guardianship, substituted and supported decision-making. We commence with an acknowledgement of country. We wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which the hearing at Homebush is taking place, the Wongal people. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. I'm joining the hearing from the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. We also pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. We acknowledge all First Nations people who may be giving evidence at this hearing, as well as First Nations people who are following the hearing in the hearing room or via the webcast. Yes, Ms. Eastman.
Good morning, Commissioners, and good morning, everyone following the Royal Commission proceedings by video or by here in the room. We're glad to see you all back today, so thank you for joining us. Commissioners, can I just outline what to expect today? So we'll start this morning with our first witness, Uli Cartwright, and then after Uli, we'll take morning tea, and then we'll have our second witness, John O'Donnell. And we would describe both these young men as witnesses with lived experience. And they're going to talk to you about their experience in Victoria in relation to having financial administration orders in relation to their lives. Then after Uli and John have given their evidence, you'll have the opportunity to hear from Naomi Anderson. It will be a warm welcome for Naomi to return to the Royal Commission. And Naomi, who's here and representing Mr. Cartwright this morning, will talk to us about some of the broader and systemic issues that she has encountered in her role at the Villamanta Legal Centre. Then after lunch, we'll then turn to the State Trustee and to Dr. Colleen Pearce, the Public Advocate. And that will conclude our day today. Again, it will be a long day, and I hope that we'll be able to conclude by around 4:30 this afternoon, all being well. So, Commissioners, having given you that introduction, can I very warmly welcome Mr. Cartwright back to the Royal Commission. Last time we saw you, you were Mr. Kaplan, and you appeared as part of a panel of valid representatives talking about the COVID vaccine rollout in Public Hearing 12. So yes. A warm welcome, and I think you're going to take an oath, is that right?
Mr. Cartwright, thank you very much for coming to the Royal Commission today to give evidence, and thank you very much for the statement which you have provided and which we have all read. I'm sure you're aware that Commissioner McEwen and Commissioner Ryan are in the Homebush hearing room. I am in the Sydney hearing room, and no doubt you can see me on the screen to the extent that you want to have a look. I will now ask you to take the oath, and if you would follow the instructions of the associate who is to your right, please, the oath will be administered to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
I will read you the oath. At the end, please say yes or I do. Do you swear by Almighty God that the evidence which you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Mr. Cartwright, thank you very much. I'll now ask Ms. Eastman to ask you some questions.
But just to confirm, you're Uli Cartwright?
That's correct.
And you prepared a statement for the Royal Commission, and it was made on the 27th of October 2022?
That's correct.
And you've got a copy with you?
Yes.
And what you've said in the statement is true, is
yes.
that right? So can I ask you some questions arising from your statement?
Sure.
You're now 27.
That is correct.
And you still live in Melbourne?
Yes.
And you live with a number of disabilities, is that right?
Not anymore. Well, yes, I live with another disability.
Okay. So what would you like to tell us about living with disability?
So I have a lung condition. I also have physical medical conditions. I was born 3 weeks early and spent the first 3 years of my life in hospital.
What, the first 3 years of your life?
Yeah, consecutively. Spent about 9 months to a year in neonatal ICU, and then the rest on a respiratory ward. Got to the point where I was stable enough to go home, and I was more prone to probably die from the bugs that are in the hospital than from my own, health, which is kind of ironic. But I went home a week before I was 3 to a foster family.
So just, can I jump
Yeah.
in there? In terms of when you said when you went home, you weren't able to go back and live with your mum?
No, so my biological mum was intellectually challenged, and she was trained to try and look after me, and she just couldn't do it safely. So I went through the foster care system. Back then was Urella, and my foster mum, my mum, I call her because that's who she is to me, trained for 6 months and took me home a week before my 3rd birthday.
And you've described your foster mum as the most important person in your life. And
Yes.
you call her mum because that's who she is to you,
Yeah.
is that right?
Yeah.
And you say, if it wasn't for your foster mum, I don't think I'd be here now.
No, it takes a lot of, I didn't appreciate it at the time, obviously, because I was young and wanted to do what I wanted to do as a teenager, but it takes a lot of work, time and effort and sleepless hours. She has sacrificed more than just her years. Yeah.
When you were growing up as a kid, you had a lot of chronic health conditions.
Yeah.
So you spent quite a lot of your time in hospital, is that
Yeah.
right?
Yes, that's correct.
And that had an impact on going to school?
Yeah. I think when I was about 11 or 12, I spent 6 months of that year of 365 days in hospital. So I repeated, I think it was like year 5, just because I didn't get enough schooling. Wasn't great. I was obviously preoccupied from, trying to stay healthy and, having my feeds because I don't have anything orally. So school wasn't a priority, so to speak.
But you did complete 1 semester of year 12, is that
Yeah,
right?
I don't know how I got there, but yes, I did.
And you're proud of that?
I'm definitely proud of that.
And in terms of having that break from school and
Yeah.
not having the attention on school, it means you've sort of had to learn to become independent and learn things like decision making just from your experience of life,
Well,
right?
it's kind of interesting because I was a child and didn't make, much decisions, and I didn't, learn much in school. But at 16 or 17, because my foster mum never had the opportunity to adopt me because my dad wouldn't relinquish, custody. I was making my own medical decisions at 16. So if it was difficult to get approval or consent for operations, so yeah, it was interesting. My decision making was built off, I guess, necessity. Yeah.
When you're a kid with chronic health conditions and spending a lot of time in hospital,
Yeah.
you spend a lot of time with adults.
Yes.
So you're listening to how adults talk.
Yeah.
You're learning the language of medical things.
Yeah.
You're watching and observing how doctors and nurses make decisions and talk to your mum, and you hear all of that, don't you?
Yeah.
And I think we've detected that you're a keen observer of human nature.
Yeah.
Did that
I like nuances. I like the detail. I get bogged down in the detail sometimes, but yes, I think people like myself with chronic illness or disability, we've been through so much, and we've had so many people talk around us and say things good and bad. We just know. I tell all my support workers that I employ now, be yourself, because if you're not, I'm going to be able to notice if there's something wrong.
Yeah. And you're used to a life of everything being written down about you. And I think I've heard you say that if there's a saying in disability that if it's not written down, it hasn't happened. Is that a
Yes,
saying you
I hope the people that are support workers that are watching this laugh, but yes, yeah,
okay.
everything gets written down.
Because one of the topics, you know, the Royal Commission's talking about this week is about decision making.
Yep.
When decision making is taken away, but also how you build the skills about decision making and how you have support to make decisions if there are tricky decisions that people need to do in their life. So I want to ask you about a big decision that you made when
Yep.
you were 16. So when you were 16, you started testing boundaries and challenging a lot of what you'd learned in life.
Yep.
So you decided at 16 to move out of the family home.
Yep.
And you decided that you wanted to move into a different place to live.
Yep.
What can you tell the Royal Commission about that time?
Um,
Can you take us back to being a 16-year-old teenager testing the boundaries? But how did you make those decisions to leave?
I think I was just a typical 16-year-old that didn't want to, I thought I knew better. And in hindsight, I'm probably going to be pretty fair on myself. It probably wasn't the right time to leave. It was a steep learning curve. But I also feel like that if I hadn't done it, I wouldn't be here sitting probably in front of you today.
Part of, I think, adolescence, isn't it, being, 16 and learning to become an adult is about testing boundaries and taking risks, isn't it?
Yeah, dignity of risk. Yes, I
Tell me
know.
about dignity of
I know
risk.
all too well about that.
So tell us about dignity of risk. And I suppose I'm pulling you not in your 27-year-old self now, but taking it back a little bit to the teenage times and what sort of risk means. Risk doesn't mean, oh, I think I might go for a really difficult and dangerous bungee jump today and I've exercised dignity of risk.
Yeah.
It could, but in a like day-to-day life as a young person. what's
Not
dignity?
taking my meds, not getting enough sleep, because obviously you need enough sleep for, for me to feel awake and alert. I don't know, anything. It could be the mundane things.
Just day-to-day choices about
Yeah.
what you wanted to do on the day or
Yeah,
who you wanted to hang out with?
The only thing that's popping in my head is if anyone else chose to do what I did, it wouldn't be a problem. But I'm trying to reflect back to 16, but it's hard because I've changed so much.
Yeah.
Like at the time, I thought that life was simple and life was good, but I think the problem was everyone was doing everything for me. So of course life was simple and life was good because my life wasn't challenged in any way, shape or form.
Yeah. So you moved into a group home around 2013.
Yep.
And you can't exactly remember when,
Yep.
but you're about 18 at the time.
Yep.
And
I know I was still at school
and you're,
for the first bit
so
of
you're still trying to finish that year 12 semester. Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was
And-
traumatizing. That's why I remember it. Yeah.
And you decided that you're going to move out. So you end up sharing a unit.
Yep.
With a lady who was 40 years older than you.
Yep.
And I think you say, even though that was a big age difference, it worked out and okay most of the time. So what can you tell us about, again, as an 18-year-old moving in, living with somebody who you didn't know before, who's a little bit older than you? Did you have a choice about who you would live with?
No, not at all. I went from respite house to respite house for about 6 months. And after, because I don't live under the service provider anymore, I looked at the files that was originally, came in, and they were made to look better than what my actual situation was because they were struggling to find me a place. And no, I understand. I don't know the process completely, but there is a selection criteria, and my case manager at the time, because it was before the NDIS, I think it was, just did everything for me. And it was just, it is what it is. And because I was going to school just a suburb over, that was the only place that was close to my school because they tried to give me consistency.
Okay. And at that time, because you're under 21, you didn't get a full disability support pension. And even though you weren't receiving the full DSP, you were determined to pay your own rent and contribute to the bills. Is that right?
Yeah.
And when you moved into the group home, you had to have a residential agreement with the service provider. Okay.
Yep.
What is a residential agreement, and what did you know about signing things like that?
It's like a normal, like when you go to a real estate agent, I think it's pretty much the equivalent. It's you know, the respect and responsibilities on both ends, what you're going to pay, what you contribute, what the contribution you know, includes, like transport, you know, food, stuff like that.
You didn't need a lawyer to help you sign a residential agreement, did you?
No.
But you felt that you could make a decision to go, yeah, I'm happy to sign up to that agreement.
Yes, but also I think I would add to that, there wasn't much choice. Like whenever you get given these things, it's not like you can negotiate, even if there was a lawyer.
And you knew that even sort of living independently, that you'd have to make some contribution to the bills and expenses. And you weren't hiding away from that. You wanted to take that on. And that was part of
it was better than being like homeless or going back home. So it's a necessity, whether I liked it or not. Probably at that age I didn't want to, but who does?
Now, one thing for you is that weekly contribution to groceries didn't mean that you had to pay for food.
Yep.
And I think, and I'm going to ask you some questions about a documentary that you've made, but I think you say pretty clearly that in terms of you've had exactly the same thing for breakfast, lunch and dinner. And at that time, like 24 years.
That statement's still correct.
Okay. So, so for you, you know, there's a routine to your life.
Yep.
And when you use the peg feeding and how you do that, you've got a routine.
Yes.
But it means what you might contribute to a house in terms of groceries and things like that are going to be a little bit different. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay. So you were in this arrangement for a period of time, and then I want to get to December 2015. Okay, so do you remember that time?
Not regarding to my statement, no. Is that when what number are we up to?
So I'm up to 12. So in 2015, there was an application made to VCAT, the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal. It was made by a support worker whose role you understood to be managing the day-to-day operations of your accommodation, so the house supervisor. And to this day, you do not know why the application was made. Is that right?
That's correct. And that person to this day, hasn't told me.
And to this day, you were not consulted about why or whether the application was necessary.
That's correct.
And you don't think there was any problems with your finances, rent and bills, because they were all paid.
That's correct.
But what you do remember is within the group home that you could remember people frequently discussing your spending decisions.
Yep.
You are a young person, and so the things you wanted to spend your money on might not be the same things that older people might want to spend their money on at the time. And can you tell us sort of what do you remember about your spending habits within the DSP and the limits that you had on finance?
I don't know about other 16, 17-year-olds, but I spent a lot of money on games, which is probably not that bad compared to some things you can spend your money on. My rent was paid. I didn't pay my chemist bill frequently, so it was, you know, high, but I paid it when I absolutely needed to. I don't know, what do 16, 17-year-olds do these days? Buy games, DVDs, TV shows that cost like $140 that you're going to watch once and probably never watch again.
So when you were around this time and you were spending things around the games and other things, did the chatter in the house about your spending decisions lead to the service provider saying, yeah, Uli, we need to sit down and do a budget or work out about spending. Did anyone talk to you about that?
They probably did, but at the time, it's when someone hears let's do a budget, it's well, that's the end task. Like, why do I want to sit down and talk about what I can't spend? Like, it would be better if they said, oh, let's do a budget because this, or this is how you do it, or if you budget and save, you can get this expensive item or something. It was just, oh, we need to do a budget because, your bills aren't paid. Well, I've been hearing that for 3 months, day in, day out.
So you think that this is the reason why the support worker made the application to VCAT to get what is called administration orders, is that right?
Yes.
And you now know that the orders were made by VCAT and you've got a copy of the orders.
Yep.
I think you might even have a copy with you there.
Yes.
And Commissioners and Chair, you have a copy of the application behind tab 24 in the tender bundle. And the Commissioners have had a read of this. But essentially, the reason that's set out in the application is that you're not able to manage your financial affairs.
That's correct. That's what it says.
And you have no idea what that's supposed to mean or why the application was made. You say, it makes no sense to me that it could be determined I was unable to make financial decisions, yet the doctor said I had capacity to make medical decisions. And so you were, and you still are, a little confused about how you could make some decisions but not do your financial decisions. Is that right?
It frustrates me. And I think if a doctor or any doctor, including my specialist, turned around and said I couldn't make medical decisions with my history, it would be a joke. I would assume that the severity of making medical decisions and the understanding the risks of making those would be far more responsibility than spending money that, I say this with respect, that you're going to get more in a fortnight anyway. You have a chance to redeem yourself, so to speak. But if you make a wrong medical decision, you can't undo that.
Yeah. And you've seen on the document that there was a box tick to say that you had received or they'd sent a copy of this application to you and people called interested parties. So you don't remember seeing the application at the time. When we're talking about interested parties, you see that your foster mother was listed as an interested party on the application. And you were 20 years old at this time. And so you weren't quite sure why your foster mother needed to be copied on the application. Is that right?
That's correct. A few things. I was 20. I'm a legal adult. I wasn't living at home for it. It wasn't a great, exit to home, but that's nor near nor there. And no one asked me. So I don't understand.
So you know now that the application was heard by the tribunal on the 21st of January 2016.
Yes.
And on the same day, VCAT made an order appointing the state trustees as administrator to manage your finances.
Yes.
Did you go to that tribunal hearing?
No, and I would assume that if I went, I would be very vocal. I was still immature at the time, I agree, but I don't think VCAT would have been so quick if I was able to be there, because at least I would have had some sort of voice heard, even if I still had to go on the order.
How did you find out that the orders were made?
I think they walked in with the paperwork. The person that applied for it, and still to this day, I talk to that person, on an intermittent basis, because I like to be friendly and network with just people in general. And they've never once mentioned it.
You don't have ill feelings towards that person at a personal level, do you?
No, it is what it is.
But it's something that
I will, what's the saying? I will I will forgive, but I won't forget.
You, and I'm looking now at your paragraph 16. So
Yep.
the entire process of the appointment of state trustees as your administrator was incredibly unjust and unfair. And you want to tell the Royal Commission, I don't recall ever being told about the hearing, and I did not attend the hearing. I was never given the opportunity to have my voice heard. I didn't have support to represent my interests, and decisions were made for me by others who supposedly knew what was best for me without so much as hearing my voice. I did not lack the skills to articulate and express my own views. Instead, the whole process I was silenced. What was the impact on you when the decision was made in terms of how you could spend your money and what that felt like for you as a young person?
I was going through this with my lawyer beforehand. I don't know the exact words, but all I know is your life stops. Just, you may as well have your identity stripped, really. Like, you can't do anything. Like, I can't even go to the bank and like ask to withdraw money, because if it's over the limit, there's no money there. B, you get given a card that state trustees transfers money on a day that is predetermined. And if it's $1 or $2 out of your agreed spending range, you have to get an invoice, and it takes 2 weeks. You can't do anything. You just stop existing in an odd way, because you can still live, you still have freedoms, but you don't have freedoms.
It was frustrating, wasn't it? To sort of like, how could this decision be made by people who don't know me? Is that right?
Yeah. And like, with that context, probably, in all fairness, probably looking at a piece of paper and seeing what they wrote, you could probably make any judgment, really.
And one of the bits of information that was available to the VCAT was a medical report.
Yes.
So this is just, if you're following me,
Yep.
and I'm following you, paragraph 22. So I'm just jumping a little ahead on
Yep.
this bit. There was a medical report from a GP who you didn't have much of a relationship with, and you think the GP didn't know you very well. I think you raised this question, is why wasn't a medical report, if that's what was needed, taken from or obtained from one of the medical professionals that you had spent a lot of your life with, who had got to know you, who had treated and supported you over many years with the times that you've been in and out in hospital? So you raised that question, like, why not go to the specialist who knew you your whole life rather than just the local GP?
Yeah, I agree. And even on that point, I don't really talk about to my specialist about my money. Sometimes we talk about, my mental health, but that's not even really important either. We talk about keeping me alive and keeping me moving. And I don't think it's something I consciously think that I would have to go to my doctor and talk about.
And the other is no one sort of gave you a test to work out whether you could actually make decisions about spending and budgeting and things. Your understanding was this decision was made because people questioned your spending, or that there might be some bills like the chemist that you haven't paid on time. So that sort of was the reason, you think, to start the process. Then the GP said he can't manage his financial affairs, and VCAT then made the decision based on that information. That's your understanding, is that right?
That's how I feel, yeah.
Okay. So you had this order in place for 3 years?
That's correct.
Okay, so can we go 3 years forward?
Sure.
Go to March 2019. Are you with me?
Yep.
Right on the time?
Yep.
So the way the order is that it had to be reviewed after 3 years.
Yep.
So you didn't do anything in that 3-year period to say, hey, I need to ring Willamanta Legal Centre and challenge this?
No.
You didn't even know about that at the time?
No.
So we get to March 2019. And what did you understand to be the reason why the administration order had to be reviewed?
Because
Can you remember that?
there's
So I'm up to
It's-
paragraph, back to 18 and 19 in the
Okay.
statement, yeah. So
well, I
paragraph
think
20.
my understanding is just, nothing can go on forever. So it has to be reviewed at some point, one way or another, to see if I've made any progress.
Did you think for this time
Yes.
that you might be able to be heard and people would listen to you?
Yeah, I would have hoped.
And did you think that you would have to be able to show VCAT and the tribunal member or the judge sort of making the decision at VCAT that you could spend your money?
Not really
responsibly?
in hindsight, yes, but like I didn't know how even the process went. So like I didn't know what the judge would or wouldn't ask me because no one had told me.
And did you go to that hearing?
No.
But the outcome of that hearing was that the order was extended. Is that right?
Yeah.
And one of the issues that you raise is, well, if the order was needed in 2016, why didn't someone come and talk to me and help me get better on my skills in spending and budgeting in that 3-year period? So you don't remember anybody giving you support to upskill your financial literacy or budget
No.
skills, is that right?
No. Nothing more than just general support conversation, but nothing formal or structured or anything.
Okay.
Not if you want this, we can do this.
And in terms of the VCAT making this second order, you've now seen a report that the state trustee prepared in relation to that review application.
Yes.
So this is number. Okay. So I think, sorry, I might have misled you. I think you did go.
It's
to the-
behind tab 26.
I think I might have misled you.
Okay.
I think you did go to the March 2019 hearings. I'm sorry, because I know there's so many dates, so.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
There is, I believe I didn't go to the first review, but I may have. 2019 seems like the right amount of distance.
'cause
I did go to one of them.
We've got 2 in 2019, so this is
Okay.
the first one. Okay, so for that first one in March 2019,
Yep.
the state trustee did a report, and you've got that, and commissioners, you'll find this behind tab 26. And that report, did you get to see a copy of the report at the time? Do you remember?
No, I don't think so. I think it may have been emailed to me like the day before or something, but I don't remember reading it. Like I got it once I was in the courtroom.
And the report says things like this: is feedback was given by the staff
Yep.
that you tended to spend your money quickly.
Yep.
And so it had been agreed that the state trustee would deposit an allowance into your bank account in smaller payments throughout the week to assist you to make the money last longer. Do you remember that?
Yes. I would say from a personal perspective, allowance is pretty like I'm allowing you to have your money. But yes, continue.
And the report sort of sets out almost every source of money that you had, and it sets out what your bills are and what your spending was. And one of the issues was around Foxtel, is that right?
That's correct.
And the gym.
Yep.
So 2 things that were really important in your life were, and it still is, going to the gym, is that right?
Yes.
I think you even asked me yesterday, where's the local gym? Okay. So going to the gym is really important for you,
Yes.
and that's something you want to spend your money on.
Yeah.
And Foxtel, I think you go up and down on Foxtel. is
I don't
that
have
right?
Foxtel anymore.
Yeah, but
I've
Foxtel,
learned in my maturity that it's overrated.
okay, but at one time Foxtel was pretty
Yeah.
important as well.
Yeah.
Okay. And there are a few other things that you really wanted to do. And this report says that you wanted to do some further education.
Yep.
And that was going to TAFE, that you wanted to
Yep.
have a holiday at the Gold Coast.
Yep.
And you went on a cruise in March 2019.
Yep.
That's on page 3. So all these things about your life and where you're spending money, they're all set out in a report.
Yep.
And then you'll see, if you look at the report, there's this little heading that says matters of interest, legal issues.
Right.
See that?
Yep.
It says, Mr. Kaplan has recently sent us an Optus bill that was in the name of Life is a Battlefield.
Yes.
The state trustees conducted a company search and Mr. Kaplan is listed as a director and secretary of the company.
Yes.
Do you remember being told that if you are under an administration order, you cannot be a director and secretary of a company?
Yeah, I got told once I'd done it.
Did you know about that
No.
before?
No.
Okay, so let's talk about Life as a Battlefield.
Sure.
It's a documentary that you've been making or now made over a number of years, is that
Yep.
right?
That's correct.
And what you wanted to do was to document your life. Like it's almost like a reality
Yeah.
documentary.
Thank you for, label it like that. Yes. Some people ask me what it's about. I'm just like, it's just an open glimpse into my life. There's no storyline or structure to it, but yes.
And part of it is you wanted to do this documentary so you could share your experiences, but it was also to help people who are able-bodied to even just have like a window into your world of living with disability.
Yeah.
And you wanted to change people's attitudes about disability and see that notwithstanding, you often have lots of cords and tubes and a whole lot of stuff going on,
Yeah.
that you are a real human being.
Yeah. I think, even some support workers were just like, oh, wow, that's what happens when you go into hospital. And, they're just like, I tell some people I live in a disability group home, but there's so much more to it. But yeah.
So doing Life as a Battlefield, you wanted to sort of set up a company to do that.
Yeah. And I still have it.
Okay. And can I ask that by this stage, 2019, you'd been working, hadn't you? Had you started your job in the supported workplace by this stage? Or did that come later?
That came later.
Okay. So
Yeah, that came later. It wasn't in my statement, so I'm like, what are you referring to? But yes, my movie.
Okay.
Came later.
Yep. All right. So this was information to that VCAT had in
Yep.
terms of that March review.
Yeah.
And you don't remember seeing this at the time, is that
No.
right? And you've also then included the decision of VCAT,
Yes.
and that, commissioners, you'll see behind number 27. So the order was made on the 21st of March 2019. And it says that the tribunal is satisfied that the represented person has a disability, is unable by reason of that disability to make reasonable judgments about their estate and needs an administrator. And that order was said to be an order that would stay in place until 30 September 2019. And it says this, in the interim, a full financial independence program will be trialled as discussed at the hearing. The represented person, that's you, may request an earlier hearing if he obtains a medical report that supports an early reassessment of the administration order. Do you remember that?
Oh, do I ever? Yes.
Okay. So the second,
Sorry, Ms. Eastman, I'm sorry, where were you reading from just then?
I'm reading from the tribunal's order, which is at tab 27
Yes.
at paragraph 3. At the
Oh, thank
bottom
you
of
very
the
much.
page.
Yes, I've got that. Thank you. Can I ask Mr. Cartwright a question arising from the report that was provided that Ms. Eastman has just referred to?
Yes, Chairman.
In that it talks about you're having a holiday at the Gold Coast and you went
Yep.
on a cruise. What did you have to do in order to get the money to pay for that?
That's a good question, Chairman. I had to first ask state trustees if I could have a holiday. And if I remember correctly, that was always put into like the end of year budget. So it was always allocated that I wanted to do that at some point in the year. Get a quote, normally from a travel agent, because if you just booked it online, you wouldn't be able to get an invoice and then give a month or two notice. So state trustees had enough time to pay it. So it wasn't very enjoyable, Chairman, because the fun was taken out of it because there was so much wait time and hoping that it will get approved.
How long did it take to get approval from the time you decided you'd like to go on a cruise or to go to the Gold Coast? How long did it take to get approval from the trustee to do that?
Probably a month if they were aware that it was coming. And that's me calling them every week just to, remind them that I've booked preliminary flights and I don't want to miss my flight. But if they didn't know, whenever they got around to it.
Did you actually book the flights before the trustee approved the holidays, or did you have to
No,
wait?
I was on the order when I did the holidays. I think at the time it was a way for me to be able to spend my money and enjoy it because, calling every couple of weeks to get extra money was just tiring and it got old very quickly.
Right. So in short, you had to get permission to go on a holiday, pay for it out of your money.
Yeah, that's correct, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. So in that period from March 2019 to the third tribunal hearing, which is September.
We're up to when they trialed the FRD. Yep.
So that time between March and September, you had to practice and do a bit of budgeting.
Yep.
And show that you were going to be wise with spending your money.
Yep.
And you could demonstrate that you could make decisions about your spending.
Yes.
And meet your financial obligations as they arose. Is that right?
That's correct.
So you're back at the tribunal for one last time.
Yes.
On the 30th of September.
Yep.
And again, the state trustees have prepared a report about you. This time it's behind number 28. So you had that report.
Yep.
And I won't go into the detail of the report, but you were, the report notes that you're an NDIS participant.
That's correct.
And it says that in terms of your funds, $150 for clothing and $100 for miscellaneous, that demonstrated that you were budgeting well with your allowance.
Yep.
But the trial had only been a few months. Is that right, Ian?
That's correct.
But this time, a tribunal revoked the order, and you've got a copy of that order, Commissioners, behind tab 29.
That's correct.
So the order went. So you no longer had the state trustee managing your affairs. And that's been the case ever since, hasn't it?
That's correct. The anxiety and the frustration of the thought of going back would prevent me from going back.
Okay. When you look back at the time with the state trustee, and I'm up to number 30 now, is never once do you recall meeting a person who was supposed to be your administrator? That's your memory, is that right?
That's correct.
And you had to mostly deal with the trustee by telephone, is that right?
Yep.
And your memory is that you might have had different people to speak to on the phone, and sometimes you had to explain your situation over again, is that right?
Yes.
And there was no consistency, and it felt like you were going back to the beginning every time you called.
Yeah. For example, as the chairman mentioned on for example, the holiday, if I called and there was a note on the system saying, yes, he can, go on a holiday. Obviously the people on the phone were doing their due diligence. So I had to go through the basic questions every time when it had already been accepted that you can go on a holiday. We just have to logistically get the money paid.
Yeah, but it was also things like even doing a driver's license.
Anything.
And another thing you decided to do when you were 24 is you thought, right, I'm going to plan my own funeral.
Yeah, because why not?
And you decided to go and visit a funeral director.
Yep.
Check out the situation.
Yep.
And work out how much it was going to cost.
Yes.
And how did the state trustees go when you said, I'd like some money to organise my funeral?
I don't know exactly, but I don't think they would have given it to me. And I don't think they would have seen the point of a 24-year-old planning their own funeral. But in my case, my life expectancy, I was not meant to walk or talk or live over like a month old. So, and with my complicated circumstances, I would rather respect my foster family and get buried the way I would like to. Yes, it's when you put some meaning behind what you're doing. Yes, it's important.
So there was this, you had this sort of sense that often if the trustees disagreed with requests for spending, that they may not really have thought about how you as a young person wanted to spend your money and made assumptions. So it a bit like an assumption about the funeral arrangements, if you
Yep.
wanted to pay for that in advance, but also assumptions about spending money on video games. And
Anything. There was assumptions about anything.
And so you really thought, do the state trustees give thought to how young people might want to spend their money? And you wanted to raise that as an issue for the Royal Commissioners. Okay.
Yeah.
So in terms of moving forward, you now live in your own unit, is that
That's
right?
correct.
Up to number 37.
That's correct.
And you've been doing that since late 2021.
Yep.
So COVID was a really tough time.
COVID was a thing.
And I think when we met you during COVID, you had some pretty strong views about the vaccine rollout.
Yes.
And you have talked about the impact on your mental health and the isolation during COVID.
Yep.
That was also a time that helped you say, these are the decisions I want to make about my own life.
Yep.
And with the support of a friend, you've recruited your own team of support workers.
That's correct.
It was terrifying at first, wasn't it?
Oh, yes. And I think partly it's a cultural thing because it was terrifying that these people were so proactive and normal. And it's just like, what? I just said something outrageous and you're going to let me go and do it because that's what I want to do. Yeah, sure, go do it.
But you're loving the freedom of directing your
Still
own support.
terrified, just in case
Still
in
terrified?
case
Okay.
you make the wrong decision. But yes, I'm enjoying the freedom.
But that the terrifying aspect of it helps you make decisions to be independent, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think
have to do it
as my lawyer
yourself.
said, a little bit of anxiousness is good, keeps you focused. So yes,
But you pay your rent, you pay your bills,
yeah,
you do that on time, and you've saved money as well.
yep,
And this whole experience has caused you to be very strong in terms of self-advocacy.
yes,
And you've thrown yourself into learning everything you can about advocacy. Is that
yes,
right? So we met you as part of the Valid team,
yep.
and I think you've done a lot of work with Valid, haven't you?
I'm actually employed with them 1 day a week now. So yes,
And tell us about how you learn those skills of being an advocate.
talking to people, lived experience, self-reflection, growth, maturity, critical conversations, deep thought, all the rest that comes with maturity. And I think I'm able to do that because my doctor at the Children's Hospital is the bioethics chairman for the Children's Hospital. So he's got an ethics background, and I credit a lot of my ability to do what I do because of the nurses and doctors and healthcare workers and support staff out there.
As we said at the beginning, you've spent a lot of time and listened to how adults talk, how they make decisions, and you've absorbed all of that along the way.
Me and my friends were talking about death and sickness at like 12 or 13 years old late at night. So yes, I grew up very quickly.
Can I read this bit of your statement? So it's paragraph
Sure.
41. As you say, what really stood out for you during the whole ordeal of having an administrator appointed is that I wouldn't have gone through any of this if I didn't have a disability. If I didn't have a disability, I could have blown all my Centrelink payments the same day I got paid. I could have spent it on whatever I wanted. The difference between me and someone who has the freedom to make really bad financial decisions is that I have an intellectual disability, and somehow that automatically meant that I wasn't capable of any financial decisions at all.
Yep.
That must be a hard thing to talk about, is that sense that you feel because you have a disability, you've been treated differently, and that's had a big impact on your human rights. Is that?
It's hard because it's frustrating. And the only reason why it's frustrating is because I know for damn sure that if anyone else did it, they wouldn't be controlled or stopped just because the other person didn't like what they were doing. And that goes for state trustees, and that goes for service providers, because they use this stuff to get what they want to make their life easier, not mine.
And as you say in 45, you're struggling to talk about your experiences without being angry about the way I was treated. And Mr. Cartwright, is this because that you're not allowed to be angry about the way you're treated?
Yeah, and I reflected and I had a few decisions. I either come out arguing or come out even more angry. But no, unfortunately, people with disability that can talk aren't going anywhere. And words are just words, and they mean nothing if you don't change. And I will do everything by the book, but I will make sure that the people that I interact with, I can do the best. And if people think that this is going to be over and I'm going to forget about this and I'm going to throw this paper down the bin and not keep it, then people will be sadly mistaken.
All right. Now, the last thing I want to ask you about, and you put it in your statement in this way, another law I never knew of.
Yes.
I can ask you about that. So let's come back to Life is a Battlefield.
The pinnacle of
the
my
documentary, which if
achievement.
people want to follow you, they can see that on SBS.
5 years somewhere.
Now they can see it on SBS.
Yes, now.
So let's talk about how we got to now. So you did the documentary.
Yep.
Some part of the documentary talked about the fact that you had the administration order.
Yes.
And talked about you had to go to the tribunal to have it overturned.
Yes.
And I think might have even been a shot of you walking around
Yep.
the bit where the building is.
Yep.
That's about it.
Yep.
So you did the documentary. It aired on SBS as part of the International Day of People with Disability.
Yep.
And then was on the streaming service. So
It'll be
anybody
there for
can
the
watch
next
it.
2.5 years. Yes.
Okay. In the days after the initial screening, this is your understanding.
Yep.
VCAT wrote to SBS and said that there were concerns that the documentary breached Clause 37 of Schedule 1 of the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal Act.
AKA the gag order.
Okay, so had you ever heard of Clause 37 of Schedule 1 of the Victorian Civil and Administrative
No,
Tribunal?
but when I read it, I understood it very clearly. It doesn't mince its words.
Okay, and what do you mean it doesn't mince its words?
It's very, very straightforward that anyone a part of it or interested parties or connected to it can't speak about it or what it's about or really anything.
So SBS took the documentary off the website.
Yeah.
You contacted a lawyer.
Yes,
Is that the lawyer sitting next to you?
sure is.
And you applied to VCAT to be allowed to show the documentary.
Yep.
Did you have to make that application or SBS make that application?
I made that application. Well, my lawyer did.
Okay. So in January this year,
On the 3rd of Jan, when
Yep.
everyone's still at Christmas,
when everybody's still at Christmas, yep,
I'm in a courtroom.
you're in a courtroom. So you go to VCAT,
Yep,
you went to this hearing,
yep,
you had things to say,
yep.
right? And what did VCAT do? I'm not going to give away the surprise, but a copy of it is behind tab 30. What ended up? Tell me about what VCAT was like that time. And
It was great. My lawyer didn't say a word because the judge wanted to see. I didn't realize it at the time, but the judge wanted me to tell my story to get myself out of it to see how competent I was. And I looked at my lawyer and said, "Is there anything I missed?" And they're just like, "Nope." And yeah, they overturned it. They squashed it. They gave me permission, basically.
Yeah. So you've got the,
Could I just put though, now
Yeah,
that
go
I've
ahead.
reflected on it, me and my lawyer found out very recently that the guardianship order and the act that was in place at the time didn't even have that law there. So no one had any right to even raise that concern. So it leaves me wondering, what were the true motives of going to VCAT? And I will leave it at that.
leave it at, but you've got the written reasons
Yep.
from VCAT, and commissioners can read those reasons, and they talk about the importance of you being able to tell your story in public, but also talk about why some of these gag rules are in place to protect people's privacy. But VCAT decided you could talk about your own life, including the administration order, and that didn't stop you.
No.
SBS now has the documentary back online,
Yes.
but you decided that you were going to do something about this. So
Yeah.
in February this year, you wrote to the Attorney General
Yes.
and you've petitioned them to, the Attorney General, to think about changing the law.
Yes.
And you have, with your lawyer, taken the steps to get the documents about you. So you can now have a look at all of the documents
Yes.
from VCAT, not only in relation to this application, but the other documents to understand what happened to you.
And I agree that the law is needed, but there shouldn't be a presumption and like an automatic, just, no, you can't talk about it.
So those are all the questions I wanted to ask you.
Yes.
And the commissioners might have some questions. But before I ask the commissioners, was there anything else that I have forgotten to ask you about that you would like to
The
talk about?
only thing was with the FIP program,
Yeah.
so it was a 6-month trial, and state trustees in their response said that I, didn't sign it straight away. And that was because the judge requested that I have my weekly payment consolidated into one fortnightly payment, and also all my bills given to me except my rent and the money for that. And they didn't consolidate it for the first month or two. And they, when they consolidated it, they didn't give me any extra money to pay those bills. So I would have been out of pocket.
Yeah.
And I don't feel, the report says that, Uli's performed well because he hasn't asked for money. Well, it doesn't need to be like that. It shouldn't be like that. And I was frustrated and upset because I felt like that this was my only opportunity to actually do it right. And the judge was going to believe people that were smarter that I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
But it wasn't set up correctly. But luckily I got, I think, 2 months and I did okay. But again, I just didn't ask for money. That's not really proving that I'm able. It's just me sitting there and
Finding a way around.
rolling with the punches for 2 months.
Yep, terrific. Thank you very much, Mr. Cartwright.
That's
The
okay.
commissioners might have some questions for you.
Mr. Cartwright, just before I ask my colleagues if they've got any questions, do you have the decision of the tribunal we're just been talking about in front of you, the decision of January 2022?
I can find it, Chairman.
It's tab,
Would you mind?
tab
It's-
30.
Yes, I do.
It's tab 30 in my volume.
Yep.
I just want to ask you, would you like to read paragraph 18, which is on page 6, if you would like to do that?
Number 18.
Starting with the heading. Yeah, paragraph 18, this heading is it in the public
Yep.
interest to make
Is
an
it
order
in the
of
public
protection?
interest to make an order in this case? Number 18, I think it is. Mr. Kaplan is not only consenting to the information being broadcasted, he is proudly asserting his wishes and intention to do so. He has made the documentary together with a filmmaker and wants people to watch it. At the hearing today, Mr. Kaplan was a strong and capable advocate for himself, and he talked of his passion and commitment to advocating for others who have experienced disability. He wants to tell a story about his life so that others can learn from it and feel inspired and encouraged by it. This is compelling reason to make the order.
Yes, I thought it might be useful to read. that. I'll ask my colleagues if they have any questions to put to you. First, I'll ask Commissioner McKeown.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Cartwright, for your evidence. I'm very grateful you provided it to us. I have a couple of questions, if that's okay.
Sure.
The first one is about when you were talking about when you were 20 and you felt you should be able to spend your money like, any 20-year-old
Yep.
should be able to, and that you felt the state trustee didn't do enough to support you to understand financial management.
Yep.
What would have helped?
I think like a bit more support in school. I learned maths, but I didn't learn how to use the maths in school. And I don't know, Commissioner, but it just feels like it's once you're in it, it's set and forget. It's just done. It's over. There's just an assumption that you can't learn anything. And because of that, they don't know where to start. I'm not sure, Commissioner. Anything would be better than nothing.
I think you made the point about school. Do you think the school could have taught you
Yeah,
more?
or like practical skills, not just what the curriculum says.
Thank you. One more question. How would you describe the level of control that you felt the state trustee had over you and your finances?
Absolute. There was done. You had no say, no nothing. You had no voice. You were just a number. They knew better. And because there's a perception that they know better, they can say things to defend themselves. And because we have a stigma of being not equal to everyone else, they just believe them. And when we get frustrated and upset, rightly so, we just get labelled as being difficult because they're appointed with power. So they know better.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner.
Commissioner Ryan.
Thanks, Uri. You're an exceptional person with an exceptional life. And I find myself, as I said, overwhelmed by that. But because you're so exceptional, do you mind? First of all, I just want to ask you one detail. Did you accumulate, when you had the financial order imposed on you at age 20, I think it was about 20 years old when that happened?
About that, yeah.
Had you accumulated savings by that stage from your...
I think so. I think I was in a couple of thousand of debt, to be honest.
So how did you go, how did you pay for the couple of holidays that you did have?
I guess I got to give credit to state trustees. Their firm grip and strict rules made the ability to be in the surplus a lot quicker and easier than I could do it. I got to give them that.
So I also left home at 16 and had a life up until the age of about 20, very similar to yours, not health and disability issues, but I was out of home at 16. I put myself through the high school certificate for a second time. So I think I'm allowed to at least ask you a tough question,
Sure.
if I may. There's a sense to which I totally agree with you that the imposition of guardianship was too great.
Yep.
But at the same time, there's a lot of sharks out grabbing 20-year-olds, selling them credit, encouraging them to take holidays they can't pay for, gym memberships that they'll never pay off. And I have to say, I fell victim to all of those things and wound up in a hideous level of debt at the age of 25. Is there a sense in which we're choosing between two extremes? You seem to have one complete extreme. Is there not a role for someone who indeed does provide some guidance for a 20-year-old that has absolutely no support in the world? How do we make sure that that didn't happen to you?
I agree, but unfortunately, it still happened.
Yeah.
State trustees, when I had big Optus bills or Foxtel bills, they just paid them without questioning it. So yes, I agree. They did protect me to some sort of extent, but they're meant to be responsible, and there's no responsibility or accountability. I still racked up those debts. The only difference was they got paid because they had to pay it, but they didn't consider it. They're like, oh, these are our obligations. We're going to pay $3,500, even though it wipes out most of your savings. So where's the responsibility? I agree where you're coming from, but it still happens.
Well, the reason I asked you that tough question is I figured you would answer it better than anyone else in the world. And I'm grateful.
I want to be optimistic, but like it still happens, Commissioner.
Well, thank you.
Just it's the one person that does it, one entity.
It's been a fascinating experience for me to listen to you. Thank you for coming to the
No
room.
problem.
Mr. Cartwright, I take it you now know that the public trustee was charging you amounts for administering this, in effect,
Not at the time, but yes, I do now.
expenses. Yeah, I'm just wondering, when did you learn that there was a charge that the public trustee would impose for these services?
When my lawyer, Ms. Anderson, told me about it, and my support worker, I thought it was quite ridiculous. I understand that, you know, businesses need to make money and people need to get paid, but like, I think my statement says like $45 a fortnight or a week. It seems, you know, I only get paid $50 an hour for consulting, you know.
Well, according to the budget that is part of that report that was prepared in early 2019, the expenses charged were effectively $45 odd per fortnight. But my question was really, when did you learn about this? And from
Recently.
your answer, I assume it was relatively recent.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. Well, thank you. I join with my colleagues in thanking you for giving evidence and thanking you for the statement you've provided and explaining your experiences. It's been very helpful for the work of the Royal Commission, and we do appreciate what you've told us both today and in your statement. So
I would like to thank you, and you know, for the feeling of actually being heard and listened to, and I appreciate you supporting us to try and change. Yeah, it's been very comforting, and I wouldn't do it if I didn't feel like I was going to be valued or listened to. So thank you for spending your time to at least try.
I've got another
Thank
question.
you for that. Thank you for those comments.
So I want to ask you just a question following from Commissioner Ryan is, do you see the situation as, on one hand, it's the state trustee, and the other is that you're all completely by yourself having to do everything alone? Or is there things in the middle about being supported to make your decisions and having some help when you need it? Is it really that sort of one or other?
With my mental health, I normally like black and white, but
Yeah.
in this case, it's black and white. It's one or the other.
So you
There's
see
no
it as
middle.
one or the other?
Yeah.
So do you think there's any room for support in terms of making decisions?
Yes, but in saying that, support workers were on my back to get me to pay bills. And as soon as I went on to state trustees, they were just like, done, over. So it's one or the other. It's either they're pushing against you to pay bills, or they're just like, nah, not our problem anymore.
Yeah.
So
And
you
then-
did have some support.
Yeah, but it wasn't productive.
Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
is it partly getting the right
It's the
support
approach.
that you can
Yeah, it's the
choose?
approach. It's the way of doing it. But the answer to your question is there's one or the other.
Okay.
That's it.
All right. Is there anything you want to say?
No,
Can I ask
think,
Miss Anderson some questions about this later when she?
yeah,
comes to us? Okay.
I was going to do that. That's
Do you want to talk about?
a nice thing to end on.
Okay, let's do that. I think I know what you've got there. So
Recently, I made sure that my rights and my security of my voice was reinforced. I went and got a supportive guardian. And the reason why I did that was, you would assume that it would be something that I wouldn't want to do, but there was a presumption in that law that I can make my own decisions. And I feel like that I had to do it because I'm having struggles with medical teams and me getting frustrated and upset. And when it gets to the point where I'm angry enough, they turn around and ask me, speak to your mum. It's just like, I'm 27, I don't need to speak to my mum. So it's very childlike and patronizing. it's sad that I had to do that to protect my own interests. I just shouldn't need to do it.
So we're going to talk later this afternoon with
Yes.
the public advocate about what a supported guardian means.
Yep.
So I'm not going to ask you the detail of it, but it's very different to having a guardian who does all the decision making over where you live or
Definitely.
medical matters. But you've decided that you want to have the backup.
Yeah, and
Of a
it's
supported
that's what I'm trying to
guardian.
get at. It's sad that I need that sort of backup. I shouldn't need it.
But it's your choice to do
Yeah,
this,
definitely.
and it's the way you want it to be
Yeah,
done.
definitely.
So if you need that backup support, you've now got something in place to help you know when to trigger it and what's
Yeah,
going to happen.
Definitely. And I'm in control of it. And I think I would leave people listening and the commission with this thought. I'm an example of what support can do. Like, I wouldn't be here just because I'm completely capable.
Yeah.
I've had an immense amount of people behind me and support.
And this is something that's just really happened even in the last week or so.
Yeah,
That-
definitely. Yeah.
Okay. That's all I wanted to ask you. Chair, could I tender into evidence Mr.
Yes.
Cartwright's statement and the accompanying material? And if you could mark these documents as exhibit 30.062 through to 30.072.
Yes, Mr. Cartwright's statement and the accompanying documents will be admitted into evidence and given the markings indicated by Ms. Eastman. Thank you.
Thank you. And could we adjourn now for morning tea until 11:30?
Yes, we'll adjourn until 11:30 Sydney time. Thank you.
The Royal Commission is adjourned.